Martin carefully pressed the seams of a finely crafted suit jacket under the dim light of his modest workshop. The room smelled of cedarwood and fabric glue, a sanctuary for his craft. His life as a tailor had been a quiet one, defined by the whispers of his needle against fabric and the occasional clinking of the old cash register. Though his skill was undeniable, his small shop attracted only a handful of clients, many of whom valued his work only for its affordability rather than its artistry. Martin was content, though, or at least he convinced himself he was. His dream of being a renowned fashion designer had been buried long ago under the weight of responsibilities and the scoffs of those who deemed his aspirations unattainable. His only solace was the collection of sketches he kept in a battered leather portfolio tucked away in a drawer. The sketches were intricate designs that told stories of his imagination, gowns inspired by moonlit nights, suits that mimicked the structure of ancient cathedrals, and coats that echoed the rhythm of the seasons. He would look at them occasionally, wondering what it might be like if the world could see his vision. But dreams like those, he reasoned, were for people with connections and wealth, not for a small-town tailor scraping by. One fateful afternoon, the bell over his shop door jingled, announcing the arrival of a new customer. The man was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried an air of superiority. He surveyed the shop with a disdainful glance, his expression one of poorly concealed disgust. "This is the place everyone's talking about," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Martin to hear. Martin, ever the professional, greeted him warmly. "I need a suit for an event," the man said curtly, handing over a fabric swatch. "But keep it simple. I don't want your artistic interpretation ruining it." The words stung, but Martin nodded and set to work, measuring the man's broad shoulders and noting his exact specifications. As the client left, he muttered under his breath, "A poor man's closet," loud enough for the insult to linger. That evening, as Martin stared at the blank pages of his sketchbook, the weight of the man's words hung over him. He closed the book with a sigh and tucked it away, resolving to forget the encounter. But a tiny spark inside him refused to be extinguished. 2 days later, the same bell jingled again, but this time, the customer was a young woman dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit. Her presence lit up the tiny shop, and Martin couldn't help but notice her kind smile. "I'm Emily," she introduced herself, holding out a hand. "I was wondering if you could help me with something special." Emily explained that she was attending a charity ball but couldn't afford a designer gown. "I've heard about your talent," she said earnestly, her eyes searching his face for a hint of agreement. "I know this might be a lot to ask, but could you create something beautiful for me?" Martin hesitated. He had spent so long catering to practical requests that the thought of creating something extraordinary both excited and terrified him. After a moment, he nodded, his fingers already itching to sketch. Emily's smile widened, and for the first time in years, Martin felt a flicker of the passion he had buried so deeply. As Martin began working on Emily's gown, his other client returned for his first fitting. The man inspected the unfinished suit with a critical eye, his lips curling into a smirk. "Functional, I suppose," he said, as if the words were a compliment. Then, his gaze fell on the sketches Martin had absent-mindedly left on his work table. "What are these?" he asked, holding up a sketch of Emily's gown. Before Martin could respond, the man burst into laughter. "You? Designing haute couture? That's rich. Stick to hemming pants, my friend." He tossed the sketch back onto the table as though it were trash and left the shop, leaving Martin's confidence in tatters. That night, Martin stared at the gown he was making for Emily, wondering if the man was right. Who was he to think he could create something extraordinary? But as he ran his fingers over the fabric, he reminded himself of Emily's hopeful smile. For her, he resolved, he would finish the gown. Emily returned for her first fitting, and her reaction to the gown was nothing short of awe. "It's perfect," she whispered, running her fingers over the delicate embroidery Martin had painstakingly sewn. Her genuine gratitude reignited the embers of his self-belief. As she twirled in front of the mirror, Martin couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. This wasn't just a dress, it was a piece of art, a story told through thread and fabric. Watching Emily's joy, he realized that perhaps his craft was more than what others perceived. Before leaving, Emily mentioned a local fashion contest she had heard about. "You should enter," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. Martin dismissed the idea at first, but after she left, he found himself staring at the contest flyer she had left behind. Could this be the opportunity he had been waiting for? Days passed, and the flyer sat untouched on his work table. Martin couldn't shake the memory of his wealthy client's mocking words. The thought of exposing his work to public scrutiny filled him with dread. He had grown used to his quiet existence, unremarkable as it might be. But late one night, as he worked on the finishing touches of Emily's gown, something shifted. The fabric seemed to hum with possibility, whispering a challenge. What if? Before he could talk himself out of it, Martin filled out the entry form, sealing it in an envelope with trembling hands. Emily picked up her gown a few days later, and when she saw the finished piece, tears welled up in her eyes. "It's stunning," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a gift, Martin. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As she left the shop, Martin realized something profound. Her belief in him was more than just encouragement, it was a mirror reflecting the dreams he had buried. He decided then and there that he would not only enter the contest but also pour every ounce of his talent into creating something unforgettable. Martin immersed himself in his sketches, pulling late nights fueled by endless cups of coffee and the faint echoes of Emily's words, "You have a gift." He envisioned an entire collection for the contest, each piece inspired by different elements of nature. His workbench was covered with swatches of fabric, threads of every shade, and tiny beads that sparkled like dew in the morning light. Despite his growing excitement, self-doubt loomed over him. What if no one appreciated his work? What if the judges laughed at his designs? Each time he hesitated, he remembered Emily's smile and the way her eyes lit up when she saw the gown. She believed in him, and for now, that was enough. The deadline for submissions crept closer, and Martin finally sealed the sketches and fabric samples in a neat portfolio. With a deep breath, he handed it over to the contest representative. As the envelope left his hands, he felt both exhilaration and dread. As the days passed, Martin continued with his regular commissions. A few customers praised his work, but others, like his wealthy client, treated him with disdain. One evening, as Martin worked on a custom suit, the same client stormed into the shop. "I heard you entered that fashion contest," the man sneered. "You're setting yourself up for failure. People like you don't belong in those circles." Martin bit back a response, refusing to let the man's words wound him. Instead, he focused on his work, determined to prove that his talent wasn't defined by others' opinions. That night, he stayed up late, adding intricate details to his contest pieces. Each stitch felt like a defiance of the doubts that threatened to hold him back. A week before the contest, Martin received an anonymous letter warning him that his participation would be futile. "Stay in your lane," the note read, accompanied by a crude drawing of a tailor's shears. Though he had no proof, Martin suspected the wealthy client. The incident left him shaken, but Emily visited the next day with a bright smile and a bouquet of wildflowers. "I just wanted to thank you again for the dress," she said. "You're going to do great in the contest, Martin." Her words rekindled his determination. The day of the charity ball arrived, and Emily's entrance in Martin's gown caused a ripple through the crowd. Some whispered in admiration, but others, including a group of socialites led by the wealthy client, openly mocked the design. "Who made this?" one woman asked loudly, feigning a gasp. "It looks like something from a bargain bin." The crowd laughed, and Emily's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Martin, who had attended to see his work in action, watched from the corner, his heart sinking. As the night wore on, Emily overheard another insult and apologized to the group. "I'm sorry if it's not to your taste," she said quietly, her voice wavering. Watching her shrink under their judgment, Martin felt the sharp sting of humiliation. Martin returned to his workshop that night, unable to shake the image of Emily's downcast eyes. He stared at the unfinished pieces for the contest, wondering if he should even bother. The wealthy client's words echoed in his mind, and for the first time, he considered giving up. But as he cleaned up, his gaze fell on Emily's thank you note pinned to the wall. "You changed how I see myself," it read. Martin clenched his fists. He couldn't let her faith in him go to waste, nor could he let those who mocked her define his worth. Emily visited Martin's shop the next morning, her face still red from the previous night's ordeal. "I'm so sorry, Martin," she began, but he stopped her with a shake of his head. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said firmly. "If anything, I failed to give you something that matched your radiance." Emily's eyes welled up with tears, and she placed a comforting hand on his arm. "You didn't fail," she said. "You've inspired me, and I believe in you. Don't let them win." Her words fortified him, and he resolved to finish his collection, no matter what. A few days later, Emily introduced Martin to her aunt, Margaret, a retired fashion designer who had once graced the runways of Paris. "I've heard about your work," Margaret said, inspecting his sketches with a discerning eye. "You have potential, but you lack polish." Though her critique stung, Margaret's willingness to mentor him filled Martin with hope. She offered guidance on refining his designs, teaching him techniques that elevated his work. Margaret suggested that Martin create a signature piece, a centerpiece for his collection that would leave a lasting impression. Inspired, Martin sketched a gown that mirrored the cosmos, with flowing fabric that shimmered like stardust. "It's ambitious," Margaret remarked, "but ambition is what sets apart the ordinary from the extraordinary." Martin worked tirelessly, pouring his heart into every detail. Under Margaret's mentorship, Martin learned not only technical skills but also the art of storytelling through fashion. Each piece must evoke emotion, she told him, guiding his hand as he stitched a delicate pattern. As the days passed, Martin's confidence grew. He began to see himself not just as a tailor but as an artist. Though the road ahead was still uncertain, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Martin's progress gained momentum, whispers about his collection began circulating in the fashion community. This caught the attention of his wealthy client, who felt both threatened and amused by the notion that Martin could compete at a higher level. The client, embittered by Martin's defiance, plotted to sabotage his efforts. Unbeknownst to Martin, the client reached out to the contest organizers, using his connections to try to disqualify him. On the pretext of questioning his qualifications, the organizers requested additional documentation from Martin mere days before the submission deadline. Panicked but determined, Martin worked through the night, gathering every receipt, sketch, and certification he could find to prove his legitimacy. Emily stayed by his side, bringing him food and encouragement. "You've come too far to let this stop you," she said firmly, her faith in him unwavering. Though exhausted, Martin submitted the required documents on time, refusing to let the sabotage derail his dreams. Despite overcoming the documentation hurdle, Martin's troubles were far from over. Just days before the contest, he discovered that his workshop had been vandalized. Swatches of fabric were torn, completed pieces were ruined, and his sewing machine was rendered inoperable. Martin slumped to the floor, feeling the crushing weight of despair. The damage was extensive, and it seemed impossible to recover in time. But as he sat amidst the ruins of his work, Emily arrived with Margaret, who assessed the situation with a steely gaze. "This is unacceptable," Margaret declared. "But we don't have time to dwell on it. Let's get to work." Together, the three of them repaired what they could and salvaged the pieces that remained intact. Though the final collection would be smaller than planned, Martin vowed to make each piece count. On the eve of the contest, Martin stood in his workshop, surrounded by his creations. The collection was far from what he had initially envisioned, but each piece told a story of resilience and hope. "You've already won," Emily told him, her voice soft but resolute. "No matter what happens tomorrow, you've proven that you're more than what others think of you." Her words gave Martin the strength to face the contest with his head held high. That night, he slept for the first time in weeks, dreaming not of victory, but of the joy his work might bring to others. The contest venue was a sprawling hall filled with designers, judges, and attendees from all walks of life. As Martin arrived with his modest collection, he felt the weight of the stares directed at him. Whispers filled the air, some curious, others skeptical. Martin's wealthy client was present, too, standing near his own elaborate display. He smirked as Martin walked by, his condescension palpable. But Martin refused to let the man's presence shake him. He focused on setting up his display, pouring all his energy into ensuring each piece was showcased perfectly. As the judges made their rounds, Martin could feel his heart pounding. They paused at his collection, their expressions unreadable. Though he couldn't hear their murmurs, he noticed one judge linger over his signature piece, the cosmic gown. The judges' deliberations were interrupted by an unexpected moment. Emily, who had attended the contest in support of Martin, took the stage during a break. She shared the story of how Martin had created a gown for her, despite his struggles, and how his work had inspired her to believe in herself. Her heartfelt speech moved the audience, casting a spotlight on Martin's journey. Whispers turned to applause as attendees began to see Martin not as a mere tailor, but as an artist with a story worth telling. Among the attendees was a well-known fashion influencer who had initially come to support another designer. But after hearing Emily's story and seeing Martin's collection, she posted a glowing review of his work on social media. Within hours, photos of Martin's designs began circulating online, drawing attention from industry professionals and fashion enthusiasts alike. The buzz reached the judges, who revisited his collection with renewed interest. When it was time for the finalists to showcase their signature pieces, Martin's cosmic gown was met with a hushed silence that quickly turned into awe. The gown, with its shimmering fabric and intricate embroidery, seemed to capture the essence of the night sky. The audience erupted into applause, and even the judges seemed moved. Martin felt a swell of pride, knowing that his work had resonated with people in a way he had only dreamed of. As the event concluded, a journalist approached Martin with startling news. During their investigation, they had uncovered evidence linking his wealthy client to the vandalism of his workshop. The story was published the next day, exposing the client's attempts to sabotage Martin. The revelation led to public outrage, with many calling for the client to be banned from future contests. For Martin, the truth was bittersweet. He hadn't needed to stoop to revenge, as the client's actions had undone him. Martin's story of perseverance and creativity spread like wildfire. People from around the world reached out to commend his resilience and artistry. Invitations to collaborate and showcase his work poured in, opening doors he had never thought possible. Though overwhelmed, Martin remained grounded. He knew that his success wasn't just about the accolades, it was about the journey that had brought him here. A week after the contest, Martin received an unexpected visitor at his workshop, the wealthy client. The man's usual arrogance was replaced with a visible discomfort. He hesitated at the door before stepping inside, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "I came to apologize," he began, his voice strained. "What I did was wrong. I was threatened by your talent." Martin stood silent for a moment, taken aback by the admission. The apology was far from heartfelt, but the effort was there. "I don't need your apology," Martin replied firmly, though not unkindly. "But I hope you've learned that undermining others doesn't elevate you." The man nodded awkwardly before leaving, and Martin felt a sense of closure. For the first time, he saw his adversary not as a powerful figure but as a flawed, insecure individual. Following the contest, Martin was approached by one of the judges, a renowned designer who invited him to showcase his collection at an upcoming international fashion event. The opportunity was more than Martin had ever dared to dream of. "Your work has heart," the designer explained. "It tells a story, and that's what fashion should do." Encouraged, Martin began expanding his collection, incorporating new techniques and inspirations. The cosmic gown remained the centerpiece, a symbol of his journey and resilience. At the event, Martin's designs were met with acclaim, and he was featured in several prominent fashion publications. His once quiet workshop became a hub of activity, with new clients and collaborators seeking him out from far and wide. With his newfound success, Martin decided to use his platform to mentor aspiring designers. He offered internships at his workshop, welcoming young talent who, like him, had faced obstacles in pursuing their dreams. Emily became his business partner, helping manage the growing enterprise while continuing to teach. Together, they created a space where creativity and kindness thrived. Their bond deepened, though their relationship remained rooted in mutual respect and admiration. The workshop was no longer just a place for tailoring, it became a community. Martin found joy in seeing his men flourish, their successes a testament to the belief he had always held: talent deserves a chance, regardless of circumstance. Emily's aunt, Margaret, also became a frequent collaborator, lending her expertise to Martin's growing collections. With her guidance, Martin's work reached new heights, earning him invitations to prestigious shows around the world. "Your vision has always been clear," Margaret told him one evening as they reviewed sketches. "Now, the world can see it too." Her words, though simple, carried a profound weight. Martin had spent years doubting his worth, but now he stood as a testament to perseverance and self-belief. One quiet evening, Martin sat in his now expanded workshop, looking through his old sketchbook. The designs that once seemed like distant dreams were now a reality. He thought of the moments that had shaped his journey, the insults, the setbacks, and the small acts of kindness that had kept him going. As he closed the book, he noticed the thank you note from Emily still pinned to the wall. It had yellowed with time, but the words remained clear: "You changed how I see myself." Martin smiled, realizing how much she had changed him too. The story of Martin's rise from a struggling tailor to a celebrated designer became an inspiration to many. His journey wasn't just about proving his worth to others, it was about discovering it for himself. In his final speech at an awards ceremony, Martin summarized his experience: "Humiliation can break you or shape you. For me, it became the thread that held my dreams together. All it took was one person to believe in me, and now, I hope to be that person for others." As the applause echoed through the hall, Martin felt a deep sense of peace. He had not only achieved his dreams but had also helped others believe in theirs. And that, he realized, was the greatest success of all.